It was a cold, moonless night in late October when Emma's life changed forever. The chill crept through the thin walls of the old farmhouse she had recently inherited from her late aunt, and the eerie quiet that surrounded the place seemed unnatural. The air felt thick with something unspoken, something ancient. Emma had always felt uneasy in the house, but tonight, the feeling was suffocating. She had come out to the countryside to escape her fast-paced life in the city, hoping that the isolation would help her find some peace after the trauma of losing her aunt. The house, perched on the edge of the woods, was old, but sturdy, built with thick stone and heavy oak beams. Yet, no matter how many hours she spent dusting off old furniture or clearing away the cobwebs, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the house didn't want her there. This evening, she had planned to relax. She made herself a cup of tea and curled up by the fire, the only light in the room coming from the flickering flames. Her aunt had always told her that the house had a way of getting into your mind, but Emma had dismissed it as superstition. Yet tonight, the atmosphere seemed to press in from all sides, like something was waiting. She couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. It was as if the house itself was watching her, waiting for something, and she was helpless to stop it. As the clock struck midnight, a sudden thud echoed from upstairs. Emma's heart raced, and she felt a chill crawl up her spine. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. The sound was distant but distinct, unmistakable, a heavy thud, like something large had fallen. Tentatively, she rose from her chair and approached the staircase. The old wooden steps creaked under her feet as she ascended. She stopped at the top and listened. The silence that followed was almost deafening, but the hairs on her neck stood on end. It was then that she noticed the faintest trace of a smell, a strange, acrid odor that made her stomach turn. She cautiously made her way down the hallway, the old wooden floorboards groaning with every step. The smell grew stronger the closer she got to the attic door, which stood slightly ajar. Her aunt had always told her never to go up there, that something was wrong with the attic. Of course, Emma had never paid it much attention, chalking it up to another of her aunt's odd superstitions. But now, in the dead of night, with the house seemingly alive around her, her curiosity got the better of her. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with dust and old furniture draped in white sheets. The smell was unbearable now, something decayed, something that didn't belong. But then, Emma saw it. There, in the far corner of the attic, was a figure. A tall, thin shadow that loomed against the far wall, just out of the edge of her vision. She blinked and looked again. There was nothing there. Just the dusty, abandoned room. Her heart pounded in her chest as she took a hesitant step back. That's when the noise came again, a soft scraping sound, like nails dragging across wood. She spun around, eyes wide with fear. The attic door was now fully open, and standing in the doorway was a pale, gaunt figure. Its eyes dark and hollow, its face twisted in an expression of anguish. Emma's breath caught in her throat, her body frozen in place. The figure didn't move, it just stood there, staring at her. And then, with a flicker of movement, it lifted its hand and pointed directly at her. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows deepening as if the night itself was closing in. Emma's feet moved before her mind could process what was happening. She bolted down the stairs, but before she reached the bottom, the lights flickered, and everything went black. She fell hard, her body slamming into the floor, the pain sharp, but the darkness was far worse. Her heart raced in the silence that followed, but she didn't dare get up. She could feel the weight of the night pressing in on her, the air thick with dread. She wasn't alone. She could hear breathing now, soft, steady, but it wasn't her own. It was close. A whisper, "Come back." The voice was barely audible, like a breath against her ear. Emma's blood ran cold. She scrambled to her feet, her hands shaking as she groped for the walls, trying to find the light switch. But there was nothing, only the oppressive blackness and the sound of the breathing growing louder. Suddenly, a pale hand gripped her wrist. She screamed, pulling away, but the grip tightened, and she was yanked backward into the darkness. She fell again, this time onto something soft, like damp earth. It was cold, wet. Her fingers dug into the ground, and she realized with a jolt of horror that she wasn't in the house anymore. She was outside. The air was thick with fog, and the moonless night swallowed everything around her. The only thing she could hear was the pounding of her own heart in her ears. She tried to scream, but her throat felt tight, as if the very air was being squeezed out of her. She stood up, her legs shaky, and tried to make sense of her surroundings. The trees around her were twisted, their branches gnarled and reaching like claws. She was standing in the woods behind the house, but this place didn't feel real. And then, from the shadows between the trees, she saw it. The figure, the same pale, gaunt figure from the attic. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its face contorted in that same agonized expression. Emma's breath hitched. She ran, stumbling through the trees, her body aching as she tried to escape the figure's gaze. But no matter how fast she ran, no matter how far she went, the figure was always there, just behind her, waiting. And then, she heard the whisper again. "Come back." The voice seemed to echo from every direction, wrapping around her like chains. Her mind was spiraling, her vision blurring as panic overtook her. She had to get back to the house. She had to. She broke through the trees and stumbled back onto the familiar ground of the farmhouse. The door was wide open, as if inviting her inside. She could see the warm glow of the fire through the windows, but when she stepped inside, the warmth didn't comfort her. The house was wrong. Everything was wrong. She looked around. The walls were cracked, the furniture in shambles. The smell of decay filled her nostrils. But worse still was the figure in the corner of the room. The same gaunt face, the same empty eyes. It was waiting. Emma tried to scream, but the words wouldn't come. The figure took a step toward her, its movements jerky, unnatural. Its lips parted, and it whispered again, but this time the words were clear. "You never left." The door slammed shut behind her. And then, the house fell silent.